welcome to episode 2 of Beccamendations from an Endo Warrior. Now, first of all, I'd love to thank everybody so much for listening to my podcast. It really means the world to me that my friends and family get to hear kind of what I go through without having an awkward conversation where I'm normally not that great at opening up. And also I'm hoping some people who don't know me so well have had the chance to listen to this and maybe can relate and feel maybe in some way that I've helped them recognize symptoms and feel a bit more normal that this kind of thing can happen. But I would like to share a little secret. I'm thanking you, even though I have no idea how this podcast will be received, because I'm pre-recording my first 2 episodes. So the last episode and this episode have been pre-recorded just because I think it's better to get a bit more content out there before I go live. And because my first episode was more of an introductory episode to me, I thought why not record one that's a bit more meaty and I can get my teeth into ahead of time so that we have plenty of time to discuss. And yeah, I think that's just the way that podcasts seem to work. So I hope this format works, and I look forward to hearing from you because the next podcast I do will be released live. So thank you so much again. So as I said, this is my second episode, but my first full in-depth episode, and I would really like to speak about the symptoms I had before I was diagnosed, because I think it's important to go through my history, and I'll try and be as chronological as possible. And the reason I'm doing this is because if there's anyone that I can kind of nip in the bud where you are and you recognise these symptoms at a much earlier stage than I ever did, that would make me so happy, because it can sometimes be really difficult not to get down about the fact that I've gone through so much kind of trauma, as in going into so many different doctors' offices and just having all these consultations. But also worse than that, I feel like I've wasted medical professionals' time, and I know I shouldn't feel like that, but I just think if I'd met the doctor who said, you have all the symptoms of endometriosis first, then I wouldn't have had to spend hours and hours and years researching into things and trying different avenues, which I'll explore in more detail in this episode. But that's kind of my aim of this podcast, is to really explain to you some of the weird symptoms that I had that I just kind of didn't correlate to being endometriosis at all. And the second half of this podcast will be what symptoms I still have and where I've been able to link the dots and realise they are endo symptoms. So I think it's probably best to start with where I first began exhibiting symptoms. And this was weirdly, and I definitely should have known, but as I look back, it was when I started having periods. So but not long after I started having periods, I also got the norovirus. So I think I really want this podcast to be chronological, but I think what I really want to get across to you guys is that it was almost a 2-pronged attack on behalf of myself and my parents, trying to explore the avenues with me. And that's because I was getting all these period-based symptoms, but then when the norovirus hit, they were gastroenterological. Sorry, there's so many. I told you I'm so bad at medical terms. There's so many words that I'm just like, I'm going to say it and really hope that I'm saying it right. So there were so many of those issues that I think when I describe my pain, I try and describe it as quiet and loud. And I don't know if that makes any sense, but for example, if I have a low-lying pain that's constant, that's quite a quiet sound. Whereas if I feel really sick, that's a loud sound. And I'll be interested to hear if any of you have kind of developed any language around your pain, because I think sometimes it's really hard to describe to people who don't experience the same sort of pain what you mean. So I hope you understand where I'm coming from, but this is the Beccamendations podcast, and it will partly be in Becca language, which I'm hoping you'll learn to understand, because I think it's taken my friends and my partner a while to get to grips with the way that I speak. But yeah, okay, so that was me going off on a bit of a tangent. But I think I'll cover the gastro side of things and then go into the periods and the gynecology side of things. But just know that this was kind of going on simultaneously. So as I said, when I was around 15, I contracted the norovirus, and this basically entailed me being very violently sick to the point I couldn't stand up. I was hospitalised, but then they kicked me out of hospital because they didn't want me to spread the virus, and that was kind of the part where I was really physically unwell, and it was really violent. But the worst part of it almost was that this rumbled on, and kind of still does for years. And how I best describe it is, it's like when I contracted the norovirus, someone flicked on a nausea switch and it never got flicked back off. Again, that's me using my very descriptive language, and I hope that makes sense. But with that, as I think I mentioned in my first podcast, the doctors put me on a tablet 3 times a day to suppress any sickness symptoms. And this is because I was being physically sick every single day, and I was finding it really hard to hide from my friends that this was going on. And I think this is another point that's really kind of added to the pressure of feeling sick all the time, is that I was in my school wasn't the friendliest environment by any means, and I always felt that I had to appear strong and have nothing wrong with me, otherwise then I'd probably be picked on. And it was really a struggle to kind of secretly take my tablets and not let anyone know. But then at the same time, I think I was really, really struggling, and I was still feeling sick even with these tablets. And yeah, I won't go into the gory details, because you probably do need to know that even though this happened to me, I have a huge phobia of being sick. So if you're listening to this podcast and you think, oh my gosh, I can't stand any talk about that, don't worry, I will skip over them. But one story I will share is I was doing my French oral exam, and I'd been managing to hide it so much, me being sick. I don't know how, but I don't think to this day anyone I went to school with knows that I was sick at school. But I did throw up in my French oral exam, and it's safe to say I didn't get the grade I was hoping for because of that. Can you believe they didn't let me retake? Oh my goodness, like the audacity. I just think, ugh. But anyway, that was the sickness. And then along with this, I was in and out. Bless my parents, took me privately, and I went through the NHS. I was constantly on some waiting list, going to different gastroenterologists. I had extensive bloods taken, other tests that I don't really need to go into details taken, and I was tested for, a doctor said, nope, I'm really sure you've got Crohn's disease. Like, this level of sickness just doesn't come along without there being something wrong. I was tested for IBD, which is inflammatory bowel disease, and I said, I think in my other podcast, that I was tested for a mite in my gut, but all of these came back negative. And now, I've never really said this before, but I think this makes me sound kind of messed up, but I don't know if anyone else can relate, because I kind of wanted there to be something wrong. Like, I was in so much pain, and I know I haven't covered pain yet and just the sickness element, but I was in pain and I was feeling sick all the time, and I just wanted there to be something where I could say, look, like, this is why I feel so unwell. But I also was in the same situation where I wanted them to find something, fix it. I didn't want it to be sinister, nothing, obviously. But I did want there to be something wrong that almost they could say, this is wrong, and then put a plaster over it. And I don't know if that makes any sense, but every time I just left feeling so deflated and so upset because I was suffering so much and I couldn't find any reason why. And as I said, during this time I was seeing multiple doctors. I was also suffering a lot with tummy pain. And every time I went into the doctors, they'd say, okay, lie down on the bed and we're going to have a feel around of your tummy. So they'd feel my tummy, and I'm not joking, everywhere they touched, so whether that was up kind of between my ribs or right low down, it hurt everywhere. So they kind of looked at me like, right, okay, she's obviously not really in pain if it's hurting everywhere. But it did, it genuinely hurt everywhere. And that I think is because I've got these tummy issues and the gynecological issues, and it's like that area is just constantly inflamed and kind of inflamed, and it's sensitive. So the doctors, I can't tell you the amount of times. I have had some amazing doctors now, and I don't want to kind of be mean about doctors by any means, but I had things said to me like, it's just a teenage girl thing, blah, blah, blah. But what I really want to cover is when I was about 15 or 16, I went to the doctors in just really bad tummy pain, and they said, oh, okay, well, we think it's time for antidepressants. And this was the first time I'd seen that doctor, and all she'd done was a quick scan of my history and had seen that I'd been in hospital and in the doctors for probably, I think when I was 15 and 16, I was going to A&E quite a lot with tummy pain, and they could never find anything, because I thought if I went to A&E, surely they'll put more effort into like looking into how painful it is. But then again, like, they never found anything. So they were kind of looking there, and then they said, yep, we want to put her on antidepressants. And I was like, absolutely not. Like, I'm feeling really down at this point because I want to be out having fun with my friends. I want to be thinking about schoolwork. Well, I don't know if I actually was, but I want to be doing fun things and being a carefree teenager, and I couldn't do any of those things because I was just in so much pain or scared I'd be sick or any of these things. And I think one thing I would love to say to my listeners is, if you know that you've got a physical problem that's causing mental impact, please don't just go on antidepressants because the doctor says you've got a mental health problem and you need to go on antidepressants, because at that stage, I definitely didn't have a mental health problem. I think over time, it's just ground me down so much that maybe now I do have some mental health issues that I just think I need to work through, and it's because I was told basically that I was being dramatic, and I wasn't. I was just in so much pain, and that has caused a real mental health problem. So now, I am taking interventions, but back then I had a physical problem, and the only mental problem I had was not fixing the medical issue. So I would say be really careful of doctors who try and throw antidepressants at you, because as a 15-year-old going on antidepressants, that would have been a lot. And for some people, it's the right thing to do. Just like everything, you know your own body. Don't just take what a doctor says you should take, which it shouldn't be the way, but I just don't think that I really felt like they were just trying to say, right, if we put her on this, she'll shut up. And that that wasn't what I needed at that time. So I am so glad that I said no to those. But then it really put me off going to the doctors, because they thought I had some big psychological issue and just weren't believing me. And I just felt like I was, has anyone ever had those dreams where you're screaming and screaming but no one can hear you? I felt like that, and to be honest, sometimes I still do feel like that, because it's just so hard to explain to someone, and then when they look at you thinking, yeah, well, yeah, we know what she's like, she's just one of those girls with her. It's really negative, and I think definitely just know your own body and be confident in that, and get a second opinion if there's something questionable that your doctor says. But also, I would like to say that eventually, after going to many doctors, and I can't stress enough how many years this took, it's still taking it years. So it's been 10 years now, and I'm only 25, so it's almost half my life I've been looking for an answer. And eventually I was diagnosed with IBS, and that stands for irritable bowel syndrome. I do get a lot of irritable bowel problems, which I definitely don't want to go into, because I feel like, anyone can Google them and most people would know what they are. But I also want to stress that IBS isn't something that you can take a test for. It's something that everything else gets eliminated. So because they eliminated the Crohn's disease, because they eliminated the IBD, then they said I had IBS. So once I was diagnosed with this, I was then put on more medication, taken off the sickness tablets, and put on Buscopan every day, and Copamine, which is like a peppermint oil. And obviously these didn't help either, because I have a physical problem that I just think when I'm in so much pain and someone's like, oh, do you want an ibuprofen? I'm like, no, it's not even going to touch the sides. Like, if anyone else out there has endo, I'd love to know what you do to relieve the pain, because when it's really bad and I'm in a huge flare, there is nothing I can do to relieve the pain. So yeah, I would definitely say they kind of diagnosed me with IBS, and that's actually something I would love to explore, because as I've been researching a bit more, the internet has said, although we all know that I do not believe the internet at all times, but the internet has said that a lot of the time IBS and endometriosis come hand in hand. So I'd love to know if you guys have experienced any of those symptoms and how you manage them. But now I'm going to circle back. As I said, this was a 10-year two-pronged attack. So with regard to periods, at 15, I was put on the normal combined pill to manage my periods, because I think I said in my first podcast that I would be bleeding for like 3 out of the 4 weeks and getting through an insane amount of pads. I couldn't. It was really distressing, because you feel kind of dirty all the time. You don't feel yourself. You're losing a lot of blood. So I was anemic as well. And I think they put me on those tablets, but then I was getting the most crazy headaches. And I have told you guys this isn't medically backed up, but I think because I must have a hormonal imbalance, which is something that I think comes with endometriosis, the kind of estrogen in the combined pill was just too much for me, and I was getting crazy headaches. But it wasn't until I made an appointment with the doctor to go and say, I'm getting these really bad headaches. Then they took me off them straight away, because there was a risk of blood clot. And it was just so frustrating, because I was like, oh, so now you're telling me like my periods are just going to go crazy again. And then they took me off the tablet for all sorts of tablets for the whole time. But my friends I've since spoken to said, weren't you monitored? Like, we had checkups after we'd been on the pill. No, there was no one monitoring me. I had to go myself. And then eventually, I think after a year, they put me on the progesterone only pill, which I had to take back to back, so I didn't get any periods. But then I would have the most crazy breakthrough bleeds, which were terrifying because it was like the most insane amount of blood, and it would come at any time and I wouldn't know when it was coming. So they took me off that. And then I know I said this would be pre-diagnosis, but once I was diagnosed, they put me on the depot injection, and I'm still on that now, and it's working so far as I don't get periods anymore, which is great because they were really, really heavy and really painful, but I'm still exhibiting all of the endo symptoms I had when I was having a period. It's almost like I'm 24/7 on a period. My tummy's always hurting and it feels like a dull period pain. So now I think they're speaking about putting me on the coil, which absolutely terrifies me. So I think, yeah, contraception is a whole discussion in itself, and I think I'll do a podcast in the future about that, and definitely try and get you to send in your views of contraception. But I also think there's so much fear mongering around it, especially around breast cancer and especially around, I don't know, just, cancer in general. And I think everyone's body is different. We're all made up so differently. So please don't be scared by things like that. I actually watched a documentary the other day, and it said that drinking alcohol is more likely to increase your risk of breast cancer than the pill as well. Caveat. I mean, hopefully I'm going to get to the point where I don't need to say everything I say is not backed up by science, but it's not. This is what I saw in a documentary. But I just think scaremongering just doesn't help anyone. And if you're in so much pain that you are bleeding so much at 15, then you are going to go on the pill and you are going to try and stop it. So definitely listen to your body, as I said before. So over those years, the gastroenterology route was definitely prioritised and looked into the most, because that's just the symptoms I thought I was exhibiting. And then it was almost just the periods part of feeling unwell that I explored, so it wasn't like the whole gynecological route at all. But another symptom I used to get at school a lot, and in general was, now I know it was fatigue. But I would go into school and walking between classes and everything just felt hazy, and I felt out of it and just kind of not present and thinking, I don't know if you ever zone out and then you're like, what did they just say? And then you have to really try hard to listen. But that would happen a lot at school. And now I look back on it, I think definitely that was something that was a sign that I was suffering with fatigue, but just didn't realise. And this fatigue is something that I would describe as, if anyone, now that COVID has happened and anyone who experienced brain fog, it felt like that, exactly like that, because I had COVID and I felt like that is where you feel like you can't quite finish a full sentence and things like that. So definitely look out for that symptom, because I think it's a symptom that's not really spoken about that much, but definitely has the potential to be quite detrimental, because it's not a sleepiness, so you can't always sleep it off. So you might be really, really fatigued, but then just not be able to get to sleep, or sleep all the time, but you wake up and you don't feel refreshed. So I would have to put on, I remember driving to college and I'd have to put on my aircon really cold and blast it against my face just to try and keep me awake. And even now I'll do kind of laps of the office and try and keep myself kind of awake. I feel like I need to be one of those cartoons that has toothpicks keeping their eyes open. But I definitely think that's a symptom that I didn't recognise as a symptom, and I never even mentioned it to doctors. It's only since I've started looking up endo that I've noticed that seems to be quite a common symptom. I also explored the dietary route, so I was lactose free for 2 years because I went to a homeopathic doctor who basically said that I was lactose intolerant. However, again, nothing changed at all. I was also gluten-free for about 6 months, nothing changed. And then I did the low FODMAP diet, and anyone who knows what that is, it's extremely difficult, first of all, and hard to stick to. So maybe I didn't do it properly, because it means that you can't eat anything that's fermentable in your stomach. So onions, garlic are ones that stick out to me. And it's just really, really difficult to stick to, especially at my school. We had school meals, so I couldn't say, if you were gluten-free, dairy-free, vegetarian, vegan, any of those things, you could definitely say, can you do this for me? But a FODMAP, it was just too confusing. Like, the poor chef would have had to have studied it for a year before they could have fed me. So yeah, very, very difficult to stick to. And that's probably the only one I didn't give my full commitment to, but I did still try it. And I think definitely worth investigating these dietary routes if you're suffering with endo, but for me, nothing helped. And yeah, it was just really difficult because I was doing all these massive lifestyle changes and nothing was making any difference to me. I think the final point that I would make before me finding out I had endometriosis was definitely the impact body image had on me as a teenager. So I really wanted to appear at school strong and cool and carefree, and that nothing was wrong. But I think this kind of got worse when alcohol was put into the mix, because alcohol can also trigger my tummy and my symptoms a lot more than if I'm eating clean and just drinking water and kind of herbal teas and things like that. So I think there was just so much pressure on from myself, but also from my peers. We're just not, at that time, we're just not a supportive group of people, really. And I think none of them actually knew the extent of my symptoms, but if ever I kind of hinted that I was in pain, they probably just wouldn't speak to me, or I don't know, it was just a really difficult time. And I felt like at that stage, I actually cared that I looked bloated more than about how much pain I was in, which I know is awful. But I think now is so much easier because I've got a small but close friendship circle, and my boyfriend all know that I do suffer with this. And so what if I have a bit of a, I mean, I'm saying this, but I actually still do beat myself up about it. But I think, you know, if I look slightly swollen, they know it's a swelling. I think it's just more difficult because I do dedicate myself a lot to diet and exercise. And sometimes I will look 6 months pregnant and not be able to do my trousers up that would have fit me yesterday. And it is really difficult to, I think, as a woman and as anyone in like today's world, the pressures on looking good and things like that are just so immense that I think it annoys me. But that is a massive, I've put it in my symptoms podcast because I do think that it really impacts my mental health, like having a poor body image due to my endo. And especially as a teenager, I felt like I looked unattractive to prospective friends, and when I wanted to start dating, because I felt like I had a massive sticker on my head saying I'm in pain, kind of don't come near me. That's harder to speak about than I thought it would be. And I think, though, on the positive side of this, getting the semi-diagnosis of 99% chance you've got it, obviously haven't had a laparoscopy yet, so can't be 100%. I think this has helped because I feel like this diagnosis kind of validates everything I was feeling, and I will be the best friend, girlfriend, sister, daughter I can be, but sometimes I do need a bit of time to recuperate. And I think now that I've got this kind of label on me, I can say, look, I've got an endo flare, I need to relax. But I don't think it should be that way. There are so many undiagnosed things that people suffer with every single day. Why can't it just be enough to say, look, I'm not feeling great, I need a duvet day? And it can be mental or physical. Like, bodies are such complex things. Like, we need to be a bit kinder to each other, and we need to take a bit more time to look after each other, and kind of, I think that's a massive point I want to make, is that we don't know what anyone else is feeling. And I think especially with regards to a doctor, you're in front of a doctor for 5 minutes or if you're lucky 20 minutes, but they're not living in your body. They don't know what you're experiencing every day. So never underestimate your opinion and how much of an impact it's having on your lives. And you shouldn't have to, but you need to keep nagging doctors to kind of look for the answer, because I think that does help sometimes if you know what's wrong with you. But I think it's just difficult to kind of explain to someone who hasn't been through it, but definitely just keep on banging on the door and trying to get an answer from a doctor. But I think that's everything I wanted to speak about. But I will go into the next section of this podcast talking about what kind of symptoms I go through now, and see you on the other side. So I thought it would be a good idea to let you know where I am symptom-wise now, and what I have managed to link the dots up with to what was a symptom that I never realised was a symptom, and what I experience every single day versus what I experience when I'm flaring. And I think maybe I did say that I was going to speak about how I manage them, and I might touch on that, but I think that deserves a whole episode in itself, and I would love, by that stage of my podcasting, I would love to be able to do kind of that in my beccamendations section, and see what you guys have to say about how you manage your symptoms, because I think, as I said earlier, my mind is completely open, and I would just love to hear what you do and let you know what I do. So to stay on topic then, I think I will explain a bit about what I'm doing now and what I'm experiencing now. So the first point I would like to make is going back to contraception. So when I was diagnosed with endometriosis by the not so great surgeon, he put me on the Depo-Provera injection, which is a progesterone only injection that I get every 3 months. And interestingly, I think I may be coming off this soon, as there has been evidence that it impacts your bone density if you're on it for too long, which I had no idea about and trying not to freak out about. But I do have an upcoming appointment with my gynecologist, so I'll let you know the outcomes of that and see kind of what my other options will be. I think I have a few main symptoms. Firstly, I always have a really dull, nagging pain in my lower tummy, and it feels like I'm so over descriptive, so I'm really sorry, but I always describe it as, it feels like there's little mice in my tummy, like scraping away. I mean, I did grow up in a 200-year-old house, and I always had mice in my loft above me when I slept, so the noise of, like, I don't know if I've got anything I can do it on, but that kind of feeling, if the audio picked that up, that kind of feeling in my tummy at all times, and that's always there. And along with that, because I can constantly feel that, and when I say constantly, I mean all the time. I never get a break from that at all. It also makes me extremely self-conscious because, it's kind of difficult talking about it. Because I feel like I look swollen, and some days I am so swollen I can't do my trousers feel too tight, and I will wake up and have a completely flat tummy, and then I will look about 6 months pregnant, and it's just not a great feeling when you work hard at diet and exercise, and you are a young woman, and constraints, or not constraints, that's the wrong word, pressures on young women are just so, and men actually, I really shouldn't have said, but pressures on everyone because of social media are just so strong, and I think that can sometimes lead me into a rabbit hole where I'm thinking, oh my gosh, everyone's looking at how swollen my tummy is, makes me feel kind of ugly, and it's just not a nice feeling. And I think definitely when I was younger, I would care more about how I looked than how I felt, as in I'd care more that I looked like my tummy was swollen than how much my tummy was actually hurting. And now I'm trying to flip that narrative into thinking, my tummy is going through a lot. There's a lot going on in there. So what if I'm a bit swollen? And I do really tell myself that, but there's always going to be that devil in your head saying, oh, your tummy isn't looking flat, you're not as toned as you should be. And that's just, I will do a whole body image section if I can build up the courage to do it. But that's a constant that's always there. Another semi-constant, which is getting more, which is really stressful, is the fatigue. I'm getting it more frequently. I'm finding it hard to concentrate sometimes. I find it hard to wake up, so I don't feel like after I've slept, I don't feel rested. I feel like when it gets to about 2 or 3 p.m, I could sleep for England. And I feel like I said earlier, where I have that big foggy haziness around me, and I just kind of seem a bit out of it, and this makes me sound really crazy, but I'll kind of stare into space a bit more and zone out a bit more, I guess is the way to put it. And that's not nice because I love being on the ball. If anyone who knows me knows, I am super organised, probably too organised. And I think that kind of makes me feel semi out of control. And I don't know if anyone has addressed it, and please let me know if there's anyone who has. But the fatigue side of things is actually something that, because the pain element is so strong, I sometimes forget to think is actually the impact it has on me. Like, tiredness, fatigue-wise, is really big as well, because I feel like I'm sometimes too tired to tackle the day kind of thing. And I actually haven't ever taken time off work or anything. I doubt anyone would even know I struggle with it. Actually, I don't know if anyone knows I struggle with fatigue apart from my close family and my partner. But it's something that is really difficult to deal with sometimes, and especially having a social life as well. It's sometimes difficult to do a full day of work and then socialise and give my full attention to work, and then my full attention to my social life, and then my full attention to exercising. So that is an element of endo that I do think should be spoken about more, because it's really hard to describe how it feels, but I think it's something that needs to be communicated, because I think if more people understand that being fatigued is not just feeling a bit tired or a bit sleepy, it is a condition, I think that would be a good thing, because I am not a lazy person, and I sometimes am afraid that I come off as lazy because, I don't know, it will be the end of a day and I don't want to go out. I just want to stay in and I want to just sleep, and I rarely give in to it, to be honest. I don't think I've ever cancelled any plans. But sometimes with, close people, I have said, can we just stay in? And I don't want to be boring, but it's just so tiring. Another symptom I have currently is I get this radiating pain down from kind of the dimples at the bottom of my spine all the way down my legs, and it feels like if you ever have been on someone's shoulders for too long and then you come down and your legs are dead, and it's like that painful, I don't know how to, it's like painful, but you want to shake your legs out but you can't shake them out because it's really hard to move them, and they feel really heavy. That I get that, I'm getting that more and more frequently, and I've heard that it could mean that there's endometriosis on my sciatic nerve. So I'll be really interested to see if they manage to find anything there, because it's becoming almost debilitating at times. I've been on the tube before and thought, I genuinely don't know how I'm going to get off this, and just kind of willed myself to get off, and then my legs kind of followed, which makes it sounds really weird, but unless you experience it, I don't know how else to describe it. I've also had it where I've been on a run and had to stop halfway because, and I mean a run of 1 kilometre, not like a huge run, and I've had to stop halfway because my legs, I've been telling them to move and they just haven't been. And I've been looking into this, and it is a symptom for some people. So I'd be really interested to hear if anyone else struggles with that sort of thing. And I also do still really struggle with nausea. It kind of goes in flares. So ever since moving to London, I've been severely travel sick. And that tends to trigger it, but also just waking up and feeling really sick, and I don't know if that's because I'm so tired, fatigued all the time, that when you are really tired, like anyone who's done long haul or I don't know, stayed up too late one day knows that when you're really, really tired, you can feel a bit sick. So I think I still struggle with the same things I was struggling with before, but because they've been going on and rumbling on in my body for 10 years, they've progressively got worse. And also some of them now I can kind of link the dots up and realise, that makes sense, that's part of endometriosis. But I also, everything I mentioned in the first section, I still struggle with, but I'm not on any sort of diet other than I am a vegetarian, and all my friends will know my line I say everywhere is that veggie? Just because I'm a really strict vegetarian, and that's nothing to do with my kind of health. That's just for other reasons. But yeah, so I'm not on any sort of diet in that respect, but I also was debating whether to say this. I'm saying publicly, but there's probably only going to be about 10 people listening to this. But I actually, when I was diagnosed, it was such a big change in my life. I was moving to London. I was doing a really taxing degree. I knew no one, and I'd just been, as I said earlier, which is incorrect, let me just say, I don't know if it's correct or incorrect, but it's definitely incorrect to say that I was infertile. And so from that point, they did put me on the lowest dose of antidepressant. And that's because with endometriosis, you have like a hormonal imbalance. And also, please don't quote me on that either, because I get really scared when I look into all the statistics and the science behind everything. But you do have an imbalance, and you are more predisposed to depression and anxiety. And I think they helped in some respect, but I absolutely hate being on them. I felt when I went on them like a failure. I felt like I shouldn't have gone on them, which is incorrect, by the way. But I think for the time I needed them, it was really good, and it does help me when I'm just in so much pain and I feel really low about it, to be on them, because when you're on them you can't go as low as you would when you're not on them. So that's definitely not me recommending them or not recommending them, but I think at this stage I was at, I needed to be on them, and I've been on them for coming up to 2 years, and I'm still not off them. So that should be my next step after I've had my operation. I think I might have covered everything. It's been quite a long episode. I'd love to hear from you what sort of episode length you like, because I know some people like a really long episode, some people like a very varying length of episode. So any feedback you have would be much appreciated. And I think now I did want to say kind of what quickly I would just like to say about online. A lot of the when you Google what is endometriosis, it refers to the menstrual cycle. And I think that's a myth that needs to be bust, if that's the saying, because I don't think it necessarily is. I think there's so many other symptoms that come along with it. On the depot injection that I'm on now, I never get a period, and I'm still in the most amount of pain. And yes, the bleeding has stopped, but the kind of every other symptom hasn't stopped. In fact, it's got worse. So I definitely, if you think you've got all the symptoms but your periods are fine, I would still look into whether you have endo or not, and just be careful what the internet says, because that's one of the reasons I've just hidden from it. When I got told I had endometriosis, I did explore it a bit, and then I feel like everything you Google ends up in may result in death, and that is just not the vibe I want to go for or be around. So I think, yeah, definitely take everything the internet says with a pinch of salt and get as many opinions or facts as you can before coming to your own conclusion. And that's why I want to do this podcast, is because this is all opinion based. This is all my opinion, and it's my experience, and that should be valid, not just all of the statistics that I've mentioned before. But I think I would like to wrap this podcast up now before we go to my recommendations. And I just wanted to thank you all so much for listening, and I really hope that when we do the next podcast that I'll get some questions from you guys, and I can't wait to interact with you. And just thank you so much again for your support. This is a massive thing for me to be doing. It's very, very nerve-wracking, but I'm just hoping that I can help it. Just one person, it would make my whole, not even day, it would make my life if I could just spread the word and help people. So yeah, I think that's it for today. I'm going to move on to my recommendations, because that is the format of the show. But as you know, my secret between you and I is that this is pre-recorded. So hopefully they will be live next week. But I thought I'd do some recommendations just from me plucking from the air, of what I recommend if you have any of these symptoms. So my first recommendation would be to keep fighting. If you think something is wrong, you know your body better than anyone. You're in a doctor's surgery for 5 minutes. If you're lucky, 15 to 20. You live in your body your whole life. So if you think something's wrong, and it might not even be endometriosis, it might be something else, it might be a digestive issue, it might be anything, and probably not sinister, obviously, but something that's making a difference to your life, you know you best. So please just keep pushing and keep fighting, and please just have kind of faith in that, in what you're talking about. Second recommendation is don't say yes to antidepressants just because you're desperate, because I think there's a lot of, I almost felt like they were giving me antidepressants, trying to give me antidepressants to shut me up. And 10 years ago, I knew I didn't need them, and that strength came out. But I do fear for people that are, maybe they don't have or a really supportive network saying you're down because you're in so much pain, not the other way around. And I think where I was 2 years ago, I knew I was feeling really like helplessly down, and I needed something to get me through it. I didn't have any network around me. I obviously had FaceTime, but when you're really low, you need physical contact. I had no physical contact with any of my family. I hadn't had time to make friends yet, so then it was the right time. So I guess what I'm getting at is just make time, or make the conscious effort to think, if they offer me antidepressants, do I really need them, or can I get by? And I think, that would definitely be my second recommendation. And my third recommendation is a bit of a plug, but it's, please ask me any questions, because I just want to be there for you. And I really recommend that you just ask me anything so we can get the ball rolling. And I mean, it is underpinned by endometriosis, just like my life is, but I have so much more to offer than just talking about endometriosis. So I'd love to explore some, challenges we go through as our generation, or challenges in the workplace, or being a woman, or anything like that. Any questions you have. I don't want to limit you to what you can ask me. Obviously, endo-related questions are going to be there, but I think if you have any just girl chat questions, or questions that you wish if you're a male, that you wish you could ask a girl, like, I'd be more than happy to answer them. Any relationship questions. So this is just my agony aunt section of my recommendations. And thank you so much for listening. I really, really appreciate it, more than you know. And lots of love, and have a great week ahead or behind, whenever this podcast gets released. And lots of love, your friend Becca. Mwah.